Huge day for Project CB9. This thing is finally gonna go back on the ground. We're gonna put those BB6 Prelude wheels and tires we picked up. I'm gonna go ahead and configure the coilovers. So let me go ahead and show you guys what's going on with coilovers. Okay, so start with the front coilover. This basically controls your ride height right here. So you wanna loosen this collar up and raise this up on the threads. And then you wanna go ahead and take your spanner wrench, that's including the BC coilovers. Basically take your spanner wrench, lock it on the top ring, and you want to go ahead and turn the entire shock body right here. It's going to be a little bit tough right here with the spindle in the way, but we're going to have to work around this thing. So just keep taking the spanner wrench, the larger size one, and turn this shock body clockwise. So I'm not quite sure what the ride height's going to be, but I'm going to go ahead, put the Prelude wheels and tires on the Project CB9, jack it up, take the jack stands out, and then we'll see where it sits on the ground. And we'll go ahead and take measurements. So let's go ahead and mount up those inexpensive Honda Prelude BB6 wheels and tires we picked up for cheap and see where CB9 sits at. Okay, first test landing, I went ahead and measured from the ground up to the top of the fender, and on the driver's side, I'm coming up with 27 inches. And over here on the passenger side, from the ground up to the top of the fender, I'm coming up with 26.5 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust this coilover 1 inch higher and adjust the driver's side coilover 1.5 inches higher. And how I'm gonna adjust the height on this BC Racing coilovers, so I'm gonna go ahead and loosen this collar up. I'm gonna move this collar up 1.5 inches. And then once I start turning this, and this bottom body starts meeting the bottom side of this collar, I know I'm there, and I can go ahead and snug this thing up. On the passenger side, I'll go ahead and move this collar up just 1 inch. And as I spin this cog right here clockwise, this bottom body will then meet this collar, and then we can snug things up. So let's go ahead and take care of the driver's side and passenger side. Okay, next day here. Last night I spent the remainder getting the suspension dialed in as best I could. As you can see, this is where it's staying right now. I'm pretty happy of where the front's at with the gap that I've got. I got about 3 fingers right now. Now, if you look at the back side, the rear tires are tucking in the fender, and I don't want it to go that low, so I'm gonna go ahead and raise that up. So what I did is I took some measurements from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender on all 4 corners, and these are basically the measurements I'm coming up with. 13 7/8 on the front driver's side, 14 passenger front, 12 3/4 on the rear driver's side, and 13 on the rear passenger side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and raise up the back end to see if we can line with the same fender gap that we have on the front side. So let me go and get the floor jack out. Got my spanner wrenches and my measuring tape. So let's get to work. Okay, now the only thing I'm doing here in the fender well when I'm adjusting these coilovers is I'm taking my spanner wrench, the larger size, and I'm actually spinning this top collar right here, which is this one, and I'm spinning this counterclockwise. And what that's doing is actually it's putting more threads onto the body right here. And as you can see, the bottom collar is separated from this bottom housing right there. And I'm basically just taking my measurement and measuring from the top side of the housing to the bottom side of that collar right there. I'm about 1/2 inch right there. That's what I want to play with. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn this bottom collar onto that bottom housing, snug things up. You take your small spanner wrench right here, which fits the bottom perfectly. You just go ahead and lock the teeth in there and just give it one firm turn right there. Kind of lock it in position. And there we go. The ride height has been adjusted on the driver's side rear. Now let's go ahead and make some adjustments on the passenger side. Okay, I think I about got it for the trial stage. Now I'm about 14 inches from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender. Now the reason I had to measure from the center of the hub is because 2 of these Prelude wheels came with larger size tires. These are 205 55/16s, where I believe the stock Prelude size is 205 50/16s. So these back tires right here are a little bit thicker. So I put on the back side. These are the oldest tires, by the way. These are 2010. And I believe the 3 front tires that came with this set is about 2015 or 2013. So, you know, we're ranging from 12 years old to 7 years old tires, but we're just gonna run it and send it. Now they're holding air, so I aired them up yesterday. They're still holding air, but you know, it is what it is. These were cheap Prelude wheels and tires. So I wanted to get this car on the ground, and eventually I'll go ahead and replace these tires, but for the time being, for testing purposes, I think they're gonna do pretty well. So remember, we're at 13 inches from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender. And I'm just about even with the back side and on the front side right here. Let me go ahead and show you guys on the passenger side. All right, so here's a look at the passenger side. Gives you a better idea of the wheel gap. So I have about 3 finger wheel gap on the front and rear. And remember, 14 inches from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender. So I think this is a safe bet for testing purposes, but I'm not sure if these coilovers are gonna settle over time, but I guess we'll find out. But I'm gonna be running these things for a few weeks before the nice wheels and tires goes on. So I believe these Prelude BB6 wheels and tires are gonna do pretty well. So I do have a spare, and over here in the back hatch area, I got the 5th BB6 wheel and tire that came with this set. So knock on wood that none of these tires blows out, but just in case, I do have a 5th ready to go. But I've got no plans whatsoever of driving this car far anytime soon. Basically gonna be taking this thing to the gym and the grocery store during the week and the weekends. And this will give me an ample opportunity to test how the suspension feels and if this thing settles down any before we go ahead and mount the nice wheels and tires into place. Okay, so before we go ahead and take the first monumental test drive with the coilovers and all the suspension components, I need to go ahead and take my torque wrench and torque all the lug nuts to about 90 foot-pounds. And then we'll be safe. Then we can go ahead and take this car for a ride and see how it performs. Such a beautiful day outside today. Perfect opportunity to be working on Project CB9. Now I've adjusted the suspension and been driving this car for about a week and a half. I believe the coilovers have set a little bit, and I got about 3 finger gaps on the front fender and the rear fender. I want to go just a little bit lower, about 2 finger gaps. So I'm going to drop down the front coilovers by about a 1/2 inch, probably the rears as well. And then also notice the steering wheel is turned over to the left when I'm driving in a straight line. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some adjustments to the tie rods, drive around for a little bit. Now, before we go ahead and install the nice wheels and tires on Project CB9, I wanna make sure that the suspension is making no funny noises, the car tracks right, and that there's no weird noises whatsoever while I'm driving. So we'll go ahead and continue to make some adjustments on the coilovers and also on the tie rods. So let's go ahead and get to work. Alrighty guys, here's right with things right now with Project CB9 in the suspension settings. Now right now, we got about a 2 finger gap on all 4 corners. Let me go ahead and show you guys. Now keep in mind, the tire size on this is a 195/50/16. I just found that out by reading the sidewall. So I got a little bit more than 2 finger gap right here, but I've been measuring from the center of the hub up to the fender lip right there, just for accuracy. And then with the driver's side rear tire, this is a 205/55/16, so these are fatter tires. And with the fender gap to the tire, I've got about 2 fingers right there. So I've been measuring from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender. Let's move on the passenger side. Okay, passenger side, about a 2 finger gap right there as well. So passenger side front, I've got a 2 finger gap right there between the fender and the tire. Again, measured from the center of the hub up to the top of the fender. Now, I don't know if you guys can see a difference, but the rear tire, that's a 205/55/16. And this right here is the correct Prelude size, 205/50/16. Okay, when I did the suspension overhaul on Project CB9, I installed on the front upper ball joints, which is adjustable up to 3 degrees. And on the back side, I installed adjustable SPC as well. I don't know what degree it's adjustable to, but we need to go ahead and help dial those things in. And how we're gonna dial in the camber as best we can before we go to the alignment rack, I'm gonna use this tool right here. So the alignment guy told me to go ahead and buy this tool. Basically what this magnet does, it sticks on the brake rotor. It actually tell you right here what degree that wheel's at. So let's go ahead and show you on the front. So go ahead and carefully insert this gauge through the wheel and make sure it contacts the brake rotor. That's a pretty good surface right there. And currently, we're reading a negative 1.5 degrees. So you got the negative gauge here, and you got the positive gauge here. As you can see, the bubble's right between the 2 and the 1. Let's go on the backside driver, and I'll show you that one. Okay, so the rear driver side. Okay, the rear driver side is a little bit worse, right at negative 2.5 degrees. We want the rear to be at negative 1. So what we need to do is go ahead and write down on a piece of paper all 4 corners of what degrees each wheel and tire is reading. So when we go ahead and jack up the car, pull off the wheels and tires, we'll be able to adjust the upper control arms accordingly of what degrees we need to be at. So for example, this is negative 2.5. we need to go ahead and adjust it negative 1.5. So basically it's a -1. Okay, in passenger side rear, it's reading -3 degrees almost. So this one needs to go back -2 degrees so we can achieve a -1 degree. Okay, now the passenger side front is reading almost a -1.5 degrees. So that's not too bad. I want to make the fronts dialed in at 0. So that's my goal for the front. So front 0 and rear -1. And the current ride height of the product CB9, as you can see, this is significantly lower than the factory ride height, but there is some clearance differences on the bottom. Let me go ahead and show you guys what's going on the front. And as you can see here, this is your front cross member tow hook, and to the left side of that is a downpipe of that PLM header. And this hangs down a little bit lower than this tow hook right here. And as you can see right here on the PLM downpipe, I've already scraped it once, and that was on accident, but I'm still learning of what clearances I have with this car. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys with a tape measure of what clearances I have currently right now. Okay, so with the factory tow hook, I got about 3.5 inches of clearance from the ground to the tow hook. That's pretty low right now. Let me go ahead and show you the downpipe. Okay, now from the ground to the downpipe, I have approximately 2.5, maybe 2 5/8 of spacing in between. And that's pretty low for a car, and I'm telling you, I pick up every single branch off the road and whatnot, but I mean, it's dangerously close. So basically this is my dilemma of going any lower with this car, is this exhaust header hanging down here. Now I do have a good idea in mind of how I'm going to increase the height of this exhaust header, but I'll save that for another video. But basically I just want to illustrate of what clearances I have with about a 2-finger gap right now on all 4 fenders. Okay, I've been working on Project CB9 all late morning, and now it's early afternoon. I'm trying to get these alignment specs into place, particularly the camber. So I've got that camber gauge that connects to the brake rotor, and I'm actually writing things down. So let me go ahead and show you guys what exactly is going on. Okay, so right here, I wrote down all my dimensions on the ground, and I compared it up to what it is up in the air, and I found the delta between on the ground, up in the air, and basically that's my goal. So those are the adjustments I need to make. So actually on the passenger rear, I didn't have to make any adjustments. That thing was -1 perfectly. So let's go ahead and start on the passenger side rear. I need the gauge to read -0.5 when it's up in the air. And as you can see here on the camera gauge, right between 0 and 1 and -0.5, that's where I want to be. And how I made the adjustment, let me go ahead and show you guys up in the fender well. And so we got this adjustable SPC rear upper control arm. So what I did is I loosened up the front nut and the rear nut, and I was able to turn that center shackle left or right, depending on if it pushed out or pulled in the arm in order to get my reading. So that's basically how I made adjustments on the rear for the camber. Okay, now adjusting the camber on the front side is really tough. Let me go ahead and show you guys what's exactly going on in the top of the engine bay. So what I had to do is actually remove all 3 nuts that hold the top of the coilover in place. Because what happens is this upper control arm, it gets fed up way up in the fender well, and there's no way you can get a wrench up there. So basically I need as much space as possible in order to pull this thing down. So now I have direct access to this nut right here. Now taking a closer look at the camber specifications, when the car was on the ground, I was at -1.75 degrees. And when I had the car jacked up, I was actually at +1.5. So I had to find the delta here and there, and then basically make the adjustments accordingly. Look at this camber gauge that's attached to the brake rotor. So that's basically how I'm making adjustments. So what needs to happen is you need to go ahead and loosen this nut up, and go ahead and take your floor jack and press this whole system upwards, just so the coilover can rest into place up against the strut tower. And then once you have that in place, and then once you're happy with the camber settings on this gauge, just go ahead and tighten up this nut right here on the top of the upper control arm. And then you go ahead, take your floor jack and raise the assembly up, and make sure the pins of the coilovers go into place in the strut tower. And then go in the engine bay and tighten up the nuts, and then go ahead, put your wheel and tire back on, and then we can safely put it on the ground and take the measurements accordingly. So that's what I've been doing all morning here. This is not a fun job, but it is what it is. Welcome to the lowered car life. Project CB9 is back on the ground after making some camber adjustments. Let's go ahead and check the camber gauge and see how we did. Let's start with the front driver's side. And check that out, guys. That bubble is right there at 0 degree camber. That's what you want. We are good to go on the driver's side front. And on the rear, we're reading about a -1.5 So we're off by about 0.5 degrees. Let's go check that passenger side front. That was my worst one I was working on today. Okay, driver's side front, we're about a negative 0.5 degrees, which is not too shabby. But I'm gonna go ahead, jack this thing up, and get this thing fixed since I got all the tools out right now. And another thing I did notice on the passenger side front, I noticed that this boot on this brand new ball joint is ripped. There's a little bit of grease coming out, so looks like I have a new project to do. Hopefully they sell replacement boots, because this is a brand new Honda ball joint and I don't want to have to drive this thing out again. Driving this thing out with the ball joint press was not a fun job, so hopefully I can find a boot replacement that goes into place. Just add it to the checklist, I guess. Project CB9 in its natural habitat on public roads. And this is how it's sitting with the adjustments on the coilovers. Let's go ahead and show you guys what kind of fitment we got. And on the driver's side front tire, have about 2.5 finger gap, I'd say. And on the rear driver's side, almost 2 fingers. Rear passenger side, I'd say about 2.5 fingers. In the front driver's side, even though the wheel is turned, that's 2 fingers right there. That's pretty tight. So I'm gonna continue on to take some measurements from the center hub up to the top of the fender edge. I'm gonna try and even it out on all 4 corners. Now what's on the rear is 205 55/16. These are much thicker tires than the fronts, which are 205 50/16. It's basically just what came on these wheels and tires when I bought these things, but we'll go ahead and fix this eventually. So what are you guys thinking for the ride height on the passenger side? You think that's a good height right there, or should go lower or higher? Let's go on the driver's side. And another view from the driver's side height. In my opinion, I think the ride height is actually just perfect. It's not too low, it's not too high. You can actually tell the car's been lowered, so it doesn't look stock, which is what I do not want to look like. So not too bad, but I'll make some fine adjustments on this with the camber and whatnot, and maybe make sure all 4 corners have dead even heights. Alrighty guys, can't believe we're now at the driving stages for Project CB9. It's definitely been a long journey to get to this point. Now I still need to do some fine tweaking to the camber adjustments and also torque down the front bolts on the upper control arm ball joints, and hopefully we should get this on the alignment rack in no time. And for those old 2010, 2015 tires on the Prelude wheels, we have a special surprise in store for those inexpensive BB6 Prelude wheels. Hope y'all can stay tuned as we continue to get this car ready for the road and bring it back to its former glory that it once was back in 1993. And remember, keep those old cars on the road because they definitely do not make them like they used to. And if you found this video helpful or entertaining, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.